right, welcome. I'm going to get the document shared here. Let's see. We are looking for SIG Cloud Provider. This looks correct. Am I sharing the right thing? Yes. Welcome to Kubernetes SIG Cloud Provider. It is August 16th, 2023. Please go ahead and add yourself to the list of attendees as possible. And I will also clarify that we are, of course, governed by the Kubernetes Code of Conduct. Be kind and considerate of others. Okay, today I did take a look at open issues and just had one that I did triage accept on. And if it looks like a wild Joel has appeared. So I did put that issue that I just triage accepted into the topics for possible discussion today. Looks like we don't have a ton of sub-project updates in textually yet. I will note that for ours, for Provider Azure, I just dropped in the links for a couple weeks ago. We did put out new versions for 1.27, 26, and 25. We're not doing further releases for 1.24, of course, per the EOL. Do we have anyone from Ali Cloud or Baidu, perhaps an AWS person who'd like to give a sub-project update?
Hi, so I mean, nothing specific update, but we're planning to start work on moving the storage webhook things to using the native way of which Nick has implemented.
Great. Feel free to put more detail if you like.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, I'll do that.
All right. And our GCP friends, what do we have there?
I don't have much to add. I think I had a long chat with Michael during last week's project meeting about pushing Antonio's PR forward to use the GCP controller manager by default in CI. So I think, yeah, that's probably the biggest thing on my mind.
Awesome. Good progress.
I don't know, Walter, if you had anything.
Walter?
No, nothing there. I mean, I think there's some stuff on the extraction migration, but let's delay for that.
Okay. Awesome. Okay. Do we have anybody from Huawei Cloud? All right. I think we have IBM.
Yep. No updates for me at this time.
All right. Fantastic. Do we have any OpenStack, vSphere, Equinix? I feel like we don't have you in alphabetical order. We should change that sometime. What do you got for us, Chris?
Nothing. Just my question below in the agenda.
All right. Yeah, I did move your question because I was like, oh, that is probably more of a discussion topic. So, okay. All right. So without further ado, let's move on to our agenda. Chris, you were bringing up a question about image hosting.
Yeah, we're kind of finishing up our move into the SIGs, and thanks everybody for your help with that. The question that came up is we currently have our own Docker and key repository, and we were using GHCR from our old repo. Now that we're in the new repo, is there GHCR hosting available in this org? Is that cool to use, or do we not do that here? Just trying to check in and see what the pattern is.
Andrew, do we have a recommendation, or Walter?
Yes. Yeah, we do have GCR registries that you can use for SIG hosted projects. I think there's I'm a little, I don't remember the details for this process, but we should be able to dig it up somewhere. There might be a staging process where you have to push a staging version of your image and have it soak for some time before you mark it like public. But
Okay.
aside from that, it should be pretty straightforward. Yeah, go
So
ahead.
it's not just published to a GHCR for the repo, it's something more involved.
And you said GCR, but you mean GHCR?
I mean GHCR.
Yeah. No, I mean, Andrew said GCR, but I was like, oh, we don't have ambiguity here, do we? It's GHCR that we're talking about.
I'm not sure, to be honest.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, but
Because the one is
I-
the GitHub and one is the Google. So like there's
oh yeah, sorry, I'm talking about
GitHub.
the
Yeah,
Google.
GitHub came up with theirs and they gave it like a not helpful name.
Oh, I see. That's
Yeah, I
GitHub's.
meant
Okay.
GitHub. Yeah.
I see. No. Yeah. So we do our image hosting on GCR, like Google's container registry. So if you want or I don't know, like with if with the whole
Yeah.
like shift with AWS, if
Without
we
a
also
tree.
support.
Well, without a tree, do we have like a specific recommendation in general? I guess I don't know the answer to that.
Might be worth reaching out to SIG Release. I think they're more likely to know the answer to this than we are.
Yeah, but I think it's fair to say like whatever image hosting is available to like the other projects, like I imagine like you can kind of follow whatever they're doing and it shouldn't be a problem.
Yeah. Reasonable question. Because I do think some of the cloud providers do tend to use their own registries if they have one, but there certainly could be a recommendation. Okay. And yeah, that's again with where you have your images, and of course if you use actions, I mean there's all sorts of things. I feel like there is sponsorship available for some of those like higher tiers of stuff, but you probably do need to get it turned on for a repo.
There shouldn't need to be sponsorship for like GitHub. It should be free. I just wanted to make sure it was enabled and there weren't any process issues with it.
So for some of the actions, etc., there are like buckets of minutes available or whatever, just depending on the plan you're on. And I think that we're on the CNCF plans that should be fine.
Okay.
But I think Walter's correct. I think SIG release, the SIG release channel would have a better idea.
Will do.
All right. Okay. Anything else about this topic?
Nope.
All right. Thank you for the comments that people provided to the draft doc that Elmiko and I were working on. I expect we'll get that in the next week or so. It's just he and I have to sync up our schedules to do one final pass on it and make sure it looks right. I'll put the link. I'll grab the link from an earlier meeting, just if anyone wants to add any more color about things that happened in 2022. And we'll get our delinquent report in. And then the other thing I noted when doing issue triage is Joel put in, and I guess I already had it open in a tab, but that's fine. You have this draft pull request, Joel, and since you are here, I'm wondering if you want to talk a little bit about what are you looking for people to do on this one? It looks like, of course, you still have some tests in progress, etc. But
yeah, I just kind of opened this as kind of a mark in the ground. So there's a linked issue with the detail in the background on this leader election thing. I've spoken to the team who are working on this for the Q controller manager, and basically they've been going through and making sure that every controller passes through a context and uses that correctly. So reviewing that the context is passed through correctly to different API calls and that kind of stuff to make sure that if it does get cancelled, things shut down correctly. So my plan was to, one, build this PR, which just changes a single line in the leader election config, into, say, AWS Cloud Provider, bring that up, start testing it, review their code, see, first for the core libraries, are we passing context through them, and kind of create a list of work to do to get towards this. I just haven't got very far with it yet.
Okay, good. Thank you for getting that started. And Walter, you have some input.
I'm not sure if it's input or a question. I haven't looked in the leader election code in probably 2 years. my memory of the leader election code, and this is owned by APM Machinery, but I see you have David Eads on this already, so that sounds good, was that it it deliberately kills the process it's in when it loses the election to make absolutely sure there are no long-running processes like controllers that are continuing to function when someone else takes over. I take it from this that the plan is to wire the context through and try to get everyone honoring the shutdown signal, so that's no longer necessary. Am I interpreting this correctly, Noel?
Yeah, kind of. So you have two things. There's the release on cancel, which basically says if I lose leader election, I'm going to tell the lease that I'm no longer holding it, right? So that means that something else can take over. Then you have the on stopped leading callback, which is normally where someone goes in and wires klog.fatalf or something equivalent to panic and exit. So the idea is that the context gets shut down, all of your processes stop, the release on cancel happens, and then you do the klog.fatal. In theory, I think once you're sure that release on cancel is working correctly, following your context, you could avoid the klog.fatal, but I don't see other people changing that, even though they've gone down this route of make sure all the contexts are observed. I can double check with David though.
Okay. Yeah, no, I was just curious. I mean, it is that last step of removing the klog fatal. You need to be somewhat sure of the context is and the shutdown request for each of the controllers is actually being honored.
Yeah, to my knowledge, they're not even doing that for the KCM, even though they're, I think, 30 out of 33 controllers ready to go. Last I spoke to them, so yeah, I can double check.
No, I think that's great. One interesting thing, and I don't know if Andrew has any input. It would be interesting to look when we make this change. I want to make sure we wire it in a way. Maybe maybe it's documentation or a README, but there are the controllers in the CCM that we, the SIG, own. And then there are the controllers running in any given cloud provider's SIG that are owned by that cloud provider. And so I think we can certainly help you with the former. I think we need a good idea of how to make sure the cloud providers are aware of the latter.
Yeah, that's on the to-do list as far as I'm concerned.
Awesome. Yeah, no, I figured it probably was, but it also, I think it is worth elaborating on that just to make sure that, it's not just your brain working on it.
Yeah, I'll have a think, and maybe we can start some is there a central place for a implementer's guide for CCMs or some sort of central documentation?
There is a sample that lives under KK of, here's the sample version and here's the bits you need to replace, that was originally written by, I think, CC.
I think the sample repo is actually the one that Elmiko was just suggesting we archive because it's 3 years old and hasn't been changed. So
I mean, that's fair. I would also say I think we have someone here who may have been through it more recently and can tell us where they looked. Whether we archive it and could put something else in, but I think there does need to be a guide.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so that's action item for me is figure out where to put a guide.
Yeah, so at the moment, the leader election stuff is kind of hard coded. If you're using XIO Cloud Provider app, I've just got it so it turns it on because quite a lot of the other stuff is kind of hard coded in there. In theory, we can make it a flag. We can make it end user choice if we really wanted to. But certainly making it so that each cloud provider can make that decision, I think is worthwhile, so that we don't just force them all in a single release.
So the other thing I will mention that is unique, it's not going to be unique to the CCM because the KCM does the same thing, but that is unique, I believe, to both the KCM and the CCM, is that both the KCM and CCM have 2 leader election leases.
That's
Unlike
exciting.
so there's a regular leader election that is one that is just for the KCM. There's one that is just for the CCM. And then there is an optional leader election flag that is used to coordinate the KCM and CCM when you want to migrate controllers from one to the other. And so the one thing I will throw your way is, Joel, is that we probably need to think through what happens if if you have that enabled, and if you lose either leader election that you would have, you probably need to then inform the other one and do the shutdown across both. And so just in case it wasn't obvious, I just want to flag that as something to be aware of.
Given the migration is, in theory, coming to an end at some point, there is a point at which that will go away, right?
I don't believe so, no.
Damn. Okay.
No, I think I think that is absolutely the assumption most people would make. However, when we originally wrote the feature, the idea had been that there might be, it was written more generically. It wasn't written just for the cloud provider migration. The cloud provider migration was thought to be the first, but not necessarily the last time we wanted to migrate a controller. So as an example, the idea had been, if at some point in the future, and I'll do it not a less vague one as well. At some point in the future, if some other controller that it runs in the KCM needs to have cloud provider in a new release, that one controller might need to be moved over as part of this. And that might be either done by this SIG, because everyone needs to move that to a cloud provider, or, and here, I mean, here's a concrete example. The Node IPAM controller, I believe, is a KCM operator for everyone but Google. And so it may come out that someday Amazon goes, the reason why Google needed their own version of this controller and cloud provider operator now applies to us. And so now we need to move it over as well. The other thing is, and I don't know if anyone else makes this mistake, but we at Google actually have multiple controller managers, not just 2. And at some point, I would like to see us get down to 2, because we actually have CCM, and then we have a security controller manager and yet another controller manager. And I'd like to see those all consolidated. And so I think there are multiple places where it would be valuable to be able to migrate controllers as you begin doing consolidation.
Cool. Okay. I will add that to the list of things to investigate then.
Great, that makes a lot of sense. By the way, when I was taking a look before this meeting, I did see this issue over in Cloud Provider Azure, and I thought, oh, I wonder if some of this, releasing and deleting things is relevant to other folks as well. So because I think we're at the end, we're at the end of our planned agenda, but I was a little curious as to, does anyone else ever run into things like this? Like your public IPs end up in a pending state after you delete a service, but then you can't restore the state of the service until you kill or restart CCM. I'm reading the what they expected. They expect the cloud controller manager not try to delete an IP of a service that was never provisioned, allowing us to reuse the same service name when fixing the original. I'm just wondering if anyone else ever runs into this.
I'm going to make an obnoxious question, but I think we've got 2 Amazon folks here. Do you guys know if you're using the default controller for this, or do you have your own controller?
Oh, sorry. I think this is Azure. This isn't Amazon, and I don't know the answer to that off the top of my head. Like, it's certainly possible we're doing something very different than everyone else, but that's why I wanted to check and see if this sounds familiar to folks from any other clouds. Like, oh yeah, we had this problem. We solved it by, Yeah, and
I
our
know.
colleague just saying like, whoa, what if we skip this? And I thought, well, are we the only people this is happening to? And I'll put a link in the notes as well to that. But yeah, and if it doesn't sound familiar, then that's fine. We can try to investigate more, but I thought I would see if it sounded familiar to others. Okay. All right, so got that link for people can take a look and see if that's happening to them as well. And then it looks like Joel has a follow-up on the wiki resources issue.
Yeah.
Tell us more about that, Joel.
A few weeks ago, I brought up the topic of AWS and a customer reporting that if they changed the load balancer from an NLB to a CLB and vice versa, they would leak resources. At the time, I hadn't done much investigation, was just looking at some initial kind of ideas. So I went and did some further research and have a much better understanding of it now. So the core service controller, when it's looking through, it calls ensure load balancer and calls update load balancer. It doesn't really have a concept of the infrastructure that's underneath. It doesn't really need to. It doesn't have a concept of the infrastructure changing. But if you do, so the way that the AWS one works, for example, and I suspect this is similar for others, it goes on, it says, which load balancer am I looking for? CLB, great, I'll follow down this path. NLB, great, I'll follow down this path. At no point does it ever say, do I have any existing NLB or CLB when I shouldn't? And they always, in AWS at least, always goes back to the ensured load balancer. So my kind of thought to fix this would be that we need to add additional finalizers, right? So if you had a finalizer that said, AWS, blah, 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 I've created a CLB, and then one that said I've created an NLB, then the AWS code could track the resources it's created better, and could then go and remove those should it no longer need them. It would complicate the update process a little bit, but it would be better than leaking resources, possibly. The issue with that is that I was reading through, and I don't know if anyone has the history on this, but if you look at the service controller, there's some notes in there that say, we pass in the service object, but the provider implementation must never mutate it. And what I couldn't work out is whether they meant you can never mutate the service object, because if you go and modify it on the Cube API, it's going to break something somehow, or whether don't modify this one in memory. Does that ring a bell? Can anyone think of any issues why a service controller going and adding a finalizer to a service it's currently reconciling might cause an issue? If the answer is no, I might go and POC this. But yeah, I brought it up again because, as I say, like I've seen this on AWS. I suspect there's similar issues for resource leaks on others if there's this possibility to change cloud providers, like load balancer backends or something. In general, it looks like we don't really ever track the resources that we build. So tearing them down again, maybe it's a bit of guesswork.
I don't have an idea, but have you tried doing a blame on the comment and seeing if the PR where that was merged had any more info?
So I did a blame. I got down to whoever added it, and I can't remember who that is now. But I don't. At the time, there were no comments on there that gave me any more inspiration. Let me see if I can find where that was. I vaguely remember your name coming up, Walter, to be fair.
I don't have further links to that, so I'm going to stop sharing. But if Joel has something he wants to share, that is totally cool, of course.
Yeah.
And I see that we have a lovely picture of Nick's dog. But Nick, we'd love to see your smiling face. Do you have a baby to show us?
That'd be great.
My baby's upstairs right now, so
Next time.
yeah, I'll bring him by next time.
So just quickly, Bridget, if Joel does want to share, you're going to have to make him
Oh,
post.
right, of course. Of course.
Here we go. So I found my context.
Yeah, I just need to go and allow you to share, Joel. There you go.
About these two.
You are a co-host and empowered.
Oh, I've never done this before.
You should be able to share just like a browser tab or whatever. I feel like every time I look at that menu, Zoom changes it to show many things. And since I always have like a zillion tabs open, it's always that moment of trepidation. Am I choosing the right one?
Yeah, this is not helpful. And of course, my MacBook is now giving me security issues. Can I send some links?
Sure, absolutely.
Sure.
I can pop it open easily as well. I just thought you wanted to drive and kind of take us through something.
I would love to, but it now says I have to quit and reopen Slack to be able to do that.
What?
So, not Slack, Zoom. That issue should be public enough for you to read, but the link that's interesting is this second one.
Okay.
So on the first one, the comment that I left.
I will start sharing again so that I can.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't have a Red Hat account, so I can't open the Red Hat thing.
Is it restricted? It shouldn't be.
It just says log into your Red Hat account, and I'm like,
Yeah, sorry.
nope.
Someone set the issue as security level. My comment is public. That's weird. Anyway,
Okay. Anyway,
if you could show the GitHub tab.
yes, I am just going back to sharing.
I came up with the comment last week of, in theory, the load balancer could apply finalizers, blah, blah, blah. However, there's a note in the interface that services must be treated as immutable by the cloud. Not sure on the exact reasoning for that, but there's a 7-row comment which doesn't provide too much context. So this is where it was added.
Tim, my kingdom for a const pointer.
Yeah. So that's as far as I got on why that comment got added. But it's this one here on line 83. Implementations must treat the API service parameter as read-only and not modify it.
Okay.
So the one thing I will say is Daniel, and sadly Daniel's not around anymore, but I know Daniel well enough to read. Daniel is pretty exact in what he says. And so I would take his comment verbatim. And so Daniel at least believed at the time that the problem wasn't what was going to happen if you made a change to the service. It's the fact that it might not be persistent.
Right.
So I knowing Daniel well enough, he that is almost certainly, the thing that might happen is that he believed for some reason changes might not be honored.
Okay, in which case I will have a go, probably with the AWS provider, because that's where I've seen the leak, at adding some finalizers when we create load balancers, persisting those in my own API call, and then using that to track which I haven't created, and then see how I go on.
Yeah, I would just put a watch on it and just see if someone does something like reverts it back.
Yeah. Cool. Okay, thanks for the discussion, folks.
Yeah. And of course, we just exited code freeze, I believe, which is very exciting. So now is your moment to get a whole bunch of stuff in before the next release, before we get back on that merry-go-round again. All right. Let's see. I don't think we have anything else on the agenda. Nick, do you want to tell us now that you are back? What's exciting for you? What's on your mind?
Yeah, well, I just want to mention that I don't know if I guess Kirtan has been coming a little bit, but Kirtan's going to be the kind of AWS representative and cloud provider, and I will come as much as I can. So I'll still be around. I'll still be attending meetings. I'm not sure if I'll come every single week, but yeah, if you haven't met Kirtan, please introduce yourself to him. And other than that, yeah, I got a nice break from all things technology related for a few months, and just hung out with my child. And I will mention that he's actually 10 months old, so I kept pushing back my paternity leave. so he's almost he's coming on a year, but yeah, he's a very happy little child.
Well, that's wonderful. He's almost old enough to be a SIG maintainer himself. So
yeah, contributor. Yeah, I've got him set up. You'll see some commits from him.
wonderful. Great. Is
Congrats,
anything-
either way.
Thank you.
All right. Anybody have anything else for today? Okay. Well, great seeing everyone. Welcome back, Nick. And before I say goodbye, I'll just wave and say, Marco. Hi, Marco. Why do I never remember getting a chance to talk to you before? Are you also new joining us, or are you just here infrequently enough? Please say hi.
Hi, I just joined the meeting and following you all, folks. I work directly with Mike McConey and Joe Speed. So
Wonderful. Well, that's so great. Oh, that's right. I have seen you here and there, Joel, say like, oh, Marco had input on this and whatnot. Well, I'm glad you're able to make it.
one or two meetings, I think. So, but I would like
That's
to
right.
be more frequently here.
Well, welcome. I imagine
Thank you.
you'll help Joel investigate some of these exciting puzzles he's usually finding. Okay. All right. We will see you all in a couple weeks. Take care.